The steamer, Sestre Levante, stood high above the dockside, and the watery sleet, carried on the wind blustering down from the Black Sea, had drenched even the small shelter deck. Graham stood there shivering, and staring out at the mist that shrouded the domes and spires of Istanbul. Then he remembered that he had been told to go to his cabin, and stay there until the ship had sailed. Number 5 was a small cabin, with a single bunk, and only just enough floor space to take him and his suitcase. Graham sat down wearily on the bunk. He took his right hand carefully out of his overcoat pocket and looked at the bandages swathed round it. It throbbed and ached abominably. He felt as if he had lost something valuable. In fact, he had lost nothing of any value, but a sliver of skin and cartilage from the back of his hand. All that had happened to him was that he had discovered the fear of death. Graham was considered lucky. He had a highly paid job with a big armaments manufacturing concern, a pleasant house in the country an hour's drive from his office, and a wife whom everyone liked. He went abroad a good deal on business. He was a quiet, likeable sort of chap, and generous with his whiskey. He was always friendly. Nothing effusive, just friendly. His attitude towards his wife was that of any man towards a wife to whom he has been married for 10 years. He was pleased by Stephanie's good looks, her good humour, and her capacity for keeping servants and making friends. The outbreak of war in September 1939 had little effect on the Graham household. For him, the war meant more work, but that was all. It touched neither his economic nor his personal security. When he learned just 3 weeks after the signing of the Anglo-Turkish Treaty of Alliance that he was to go to Turkey on business, he was troubled only by the dismal prospect of spending Christmas away from home. Towards the middle of November, he reached Istanbul and left it almost immediately for Izmir and later Gallipoli. On the 1st of January, he took a train back to Istanbul, the starting point of his journey home. He was met at the station by Köpekin, the company's representative in Turkey. He was a plump, exuberant man, with irrepressible high spirits and a vast fund of low cunning. He wrung Graham's hand enthusiastically. "It is good to see you back. I have engaged a room for you at the Adler Palace. I have arranged a farewell dinner. The expense is mine." "It's very good of you." "A great pleasure, my dear fellow. Afterwards, we will amuse ourselves a little. Le Jockey Cabaret. You will like it. No riffraff." Graham's heart sank. He had expected to have dinner with Köpekin, but he had been promising himself that at about 10 o'clock he would have a hot bath and go to bed with a detective story. It was 10:30 when Köpekin announced that it was time for Le Jockey Cabaret. "Sirs, the proprietor is a friend of mine, so they will not cheat us." The place was crowded and very noisy. Serge was a sharp-featured Russian with bristly grey hair. He greeted them graciously enough and showed them to a table beside the dance floor. Köpekin ordered a bottle of brandy. The band brought an American dance tune which they had been playing with painful zeal to an abrupt end, and began with more success to play a rumba. Köpekin said, "Would you like to dance? There are plenty of girls. Say which you fancy, and I will speak to Serge." "Oh, don't bother. I really don't think I ought to stay long." "You must stop thinking about your journey. Your train does not go until 11 tomorrow morning, and I have reserved a sleeper. You can sleep all the way to Paris. I shall dance now and find a nice girl for you." Graham felt guilty. He should, he knew, be displaying more enthusiasm. Kopeikin was, after all, being extraordinarily kind. He drank some brandy. More people were arriving. He turned his head to watch Kopeikin dancing. The girl was thin and dark. Her red evening dress drooped on her as if it had been made for a bigger woman. She smiled a great deal. Kopeikin held her slightly away from him and talked all the time they were dancing. When the music stopped, he brought the girl over to their table. "This is Maria," he said. "She's a very nice girl and has good manners." She sat down beside Graham, and Kopeikin poured out some brandy for her. She took it without comment and raised it to her lips. The music began again, and turning to Graham, she asked him if he would like to dance. She danced well enough for him to feel that he too was dancing well. He felt less depressed and asked her to dance again. The second time she pressed her thin body hard against him. He saw a grubby shoulder strap begin to work its way out from under the red satin, and smelt the heat of her body behind the scent she used. She began to talk. Did he know Istanbul well? Did he know Paris and London? She had never been to those places. Had he many friends in Istanbul? She asked because there was a gentleman who had come in just after him, who seemed to know him. This gentleman kept looking at him. "The gentleman is sitting at the bar," she said. "It is the one with the handkerchief in his hand." They had reached a point in the floor from which you could see the bar. The man was sitting on a stool with a glass of vermouth in front of him. He was a short, thin man with a stupid face, very bony, with large nostrils and full lips pressed together, as if he had sore gums or were trying to keep his temper. He was intensely pale, and his hair was plastered in streaks across his skull. He wore a crumpled brown suit with padded shoulders. As Graham watched him, he wiped his upper lip with a handkerchief, as if the heat of the place were making him sweat. "He doesn't seem to be looking at me now," Graham said. "I don't know him." Maria pressed his arm to her side with her elbow. "I do not know him either, but I know the type. When such types look at you more than once, it is advisable to be careful." Her solemnity was ludicrous. He looked again at the man at the bar. He was sipping his vermouth, an inoffensive creature. "I don't think I need worry," he said. She relaxed the pressure on his arm. "Perhaps not." She seemed suddenly to lose interest in the subject. The band stopped, and they returned to the table. "She dances very nicely, doesn't she?" said Kopeikin. "Very." She smiled at them and finished her drink as if she were thirsty. At that moment, the band played a resounding chord, and most of the lights went out. A spotlight quivered on the floor in front of the platform. "The attraction," said Maria. "It is very good. Josette and her partner José, dancers from Paris. This is their last night here. They have had a great success." The spotlight swept to the entrance door. Then, as the band struck up the Blue Danube waltz, the dancers glided onto the floor. Josette was a slim woman with beautiful arms and shoulders and a mass of gleaming fair hair. Her heavily lidded eyes and the full lips in a half-smile contradicted in a curious way the swift neatness of her movements. Graham saw that she was not a dancer, but a woman who had been trained to dance, and who did so with a sort of indolent sensuality. Her partner was a dark, preoccupied man with tight, disagreeable lips and an irritating way of sticking his tongue hard in his cheek as he prepared to exert himself. He moved badly and was clumsy. But the audience was not looking at him, and when they had finished called loudly for an encore. It was given. Mademoiselle Josette took a bow and was presented with a bouquet of flowers. She returned several times and bowed and kissed her hand. "She is quite charming, isn't she?" Kopeikin said as the lights went up. "Would you like to have her to the table for a drink? I know her well. You might take to her, I think." Maria stared after him as he went across the floor and remained silent for a moment. Then she said, "Do you like Mademoiselle Josette?" "She dances very well," said Graham. She has had many rich lovers. Are you a businessman? No, an engineer. She drained her glass and stood up. Will you excuse me, please? I wish to speak to my friend. I will come back if you wish. Graham saw her red dress disappear in the crowd around the bar. Kopeikin returned. Josette asks us to have a drink in her dressing room. She is leaving Istanbul tomorrow and does not wish to come out here. She will have to speak to so many people. Josette's dressing room was a space 8 feet square, partitioned off from the other half of what appeared to be the proprietor's office by a brown curtain. There was a mixed smell of stale cigarette smoke, face powder, and damp upholstery. José got up from his dressing table. Still wiping grease paint from his face, he walked out without a glance at them. For some reason, Kopeikin winked at Graham. Josette was leaning forward in her chair, dabbing at her eyebrows with a swab of cotton wool. She began to speak in slow, careful English. Please excuse me. It is this filthy paint. Merde! She threw the swab down, stood up suddenly and turned her face to them. She flourished a hand around the room. I do not like to ask you to sit down in this filth, but please try to make yourself comfortable. It is too bad we cannot sit together in comfort outside, but there are so many men who make some shishi if one does not stop and drink their champagne. The champagne here is filthy. How long do you stay here, Mr. Graham? I, too, leave tomorrow. She amused him. Her posturing was absurd. Every movement was calculated. It was as if she was still dancing. It is terrible, this travelling, and you go back to your war, these filthy Nazis. They talked for a time about the war. Graham saw that behind her posturing, she was quick and shrewd. Kopeikin raised his glass. I drink, he said, to your 2 journeys. No, my heart is not in the toast. It is a pity there should be 2 journeys. You are both going to Paris, you are both friends of mine, and so have much in common. Graham smiled, trying not to look startled. He saw that she was watching him with amusement in her eyes. He put the best face on the situation that he could. I was hoping to suggest the same thing. I am leaving by the 11 o'clock train. In the first class, Mr. Graham? Yes. Then there are 2 reasons why we cannot travel together. I am not leaving by that train, and I travel in the 2nd class. It is perhaps just as well. José would wish to play cards with you all the way, and you would lose your money. Perhaps, he said, we could meet in Paris. She stood up and smiled kindly at him. I shall stay at the Hôtel des Belges near Trinité. The Hôtel des Belges, he said. I shall remember. She pressed his fingers gently. I'm sure you will. It was cold in the street. The wind was beginning to moan through the telephone wires. We shall be having snow, said Kopeikin. It is to be hoped that you will miss the snow on your journey. I shall take a bottle of brandy with me. Kopeikin grunted. Still, I do not envy you, travelling at this time. So many unpleasant things can happen in wartime. War, he added solemnly, is unpleasant. They had stopped outside the Adler Palace Hotel. Will you come in for a drink? Kopeikin shook his head. You must get some sleep. Good night, my dear fellow. Graham went inside. He climbed wearily up the stairs to his room on the 2nd floor. He put the key in the lock, pushed the door open, and felt along the wall for the light switch. The next moment there was a splinter of flame in the darkness, and an ear-splitting detonation. Before he could move or even think, the flame and the noise came again, and it seemed as if a bar of white-hot metal had been pressed against the back of his right hand. Another shot scattered plaster behind him. There was silence. He was dimly aware that the window was open and someone was moving by it. His hands seemed to be numb, but he could feel blood beginning to trickle between his fingers. The air reeked of cordite fumes. As his eyes became used to the darkness, he saw that whoever had been at the window had left by it. There would be another light switch beside the bed. With his left hand he fumbled along the wall towards it. His hand touched the telephone. Hardly knowing what he was doing, he picked it up. He heard a click as the night porter plugged in at the switchboard. "Room 36, he said, and was surprised to find that he was shouting. "Something has happened. I need help." Kopeikin came into the room looking grave. "My dear fellow," was his greeting. "Where is the doctor?" "He's just left. It's only a graze, nothing serious. The management have presented me with a bottle of whiskey. Sit down and help yourself." Kopeikin walked over to the window. He stooped and picked something up. A small brass cartridge case. "A 9mm caliber self-loading pistol," he remarked. "An unpleasant thing." He opened the window and looked out. Graham sighed. "I really don't think it's any good playing detective, Kopeikin. The man was in the room, I disturbed him, and he shot at me. Shut the window and drink some whiskey." Graham realized that he was being ungracious. "It's extremely kind of you to take so much trouble, but I seem to have made a lot of fuss about nothing." Kopeikin frowned. "Unfortunately, a lot more fuss must be made." "What, you think we ought to call in the police?" "I don't see that it can do any good. My train leaves at 11. I don't want to miss it." "I am afraid you cannot leave on that train." "Of course I can. I'm perfectly all right." "Did you notice that both your windows and the shutters outside have been forced open? There is a terrace below. Above the terrace there is a steel framework. The man obviously climbed up by the framework. He could reach the balconies of all the rooms on this floor that way, but can you tell me why he chooses one of the few rooms with both shutters and windows locked? Does he not seem to have been a very curious thief? He breaks in through a locked window. If you had been in bed, he would certainly have awakened you. He must have known you were not there. He fires 3 shots at you. Does it not occur to you that this man was shooting to kill you, and that he came here for no other purpose?" Graham laughed. "What conceivable reason could anyone have to kill me? I'm the most harmless man alive." Kopeikin glared at him stonily. "Are you? You ask me why anyone should want to kill you. There is an excellent reason. I cannot be more explicit. I have official instructions." "Kopeikin, what is all this nonsense?" "Colonel Haki. He is the head of the Turkish secret police. He is expecting us to meet him now to discuss this affair. I may tell you, I anticipated that you might not wish to go, and told him so. He said that if you do not go, you would be fetched. I have a taxi outside." Colonel Haki was a tall man with lean cheeks and grey hair, cropped Prussian fashion. He wore an officer's tunic, with riding breeches and cavalry boots. There was nothing to show that he had recently been asleep. His eyes were grey and very wide awake. They surveyed Graham with interest. "I have told him nothing," said Kopeikin. "At your suggestion, Colonel, you may remember." Colonel Haki chuckled. He lounged back in his chair and crossed his legs. "You must realize, Mr. Graham," he said, "that an attempt was made to kill you tonight." "Why?" demanded Graham. "I don't see it. I returned to my room to find a man had got in. Obviously he was some sort of thief. I disturbed him. He fired at me and then escaped." "You have not, I understand, reported this matter to the police." "I do not consider it could do any good. I didn't see the man's face. If I have broken the law in any way, I am sorry." "It does not matter." The colonel lit a cigarette and blew smoke at the ceiling. "But I have a duty, Mr. Graham, to protect you." "But protect me from what?" "You are in the employ of Messrs. Cater and Bliss, the English armament manufacturers. You are a naval ordnance expert." "I'm an engineer." Naval ordnance happens to be my subject. Messrs. Cater and Bliss," Hackey went on, "have contracted to do work for my government. Now, I do not know what exactly that work is." He waved his cigarette airily. "But I have been told some things. I know that several of our naval vessels are to be rearmed, new guns and torpedo tubes, and you were sent out to discuss the matter with our dockyard experts. The new equipment should be delivered by the spring. The international situation demands that. The naval authorities of Germany and Italy and Russia are well aware that these vessels are to be rearmed. Have you ever considered yourself indispensable, Mr. Graham?" Graham laughed. "Certainly not. I could tell you the names of dozens of men with my qualifications." "Mr. Graham," said Colonel Hackey, "for once in your life you are indispensable. Let us suppose that instead of sitting here talking with me, you were lying on an operating table with a bullet in your lung. What would be the effect?" "The company would send another man out." "But wait." The Colonel held up a forbidding arm. "Surely Mr. Kopeikin could arrange to have your papers taken to England. Notes, sketches, drawings." Graham flushed. "I gather from your tone that you know I was forbidden to put certain things on paper." "Yes, Mr. Graham, I do know that. Another expert would have to be sent out to do your work again, and meanwhile the spring would be here, and those ships would still be lying in the dockyards waiting for their new guns and torpedo tubes. Turkey and Great Britain are allies. It is in the interests of your country's enemies that when the snow melts, Turkish naval strength should be exactly what it is now. They will do anything to see that it is so. Anything, Mr. Graham." Graham had to force himself to smile. "A little melodramatic, aren't you?" The Colonel stared at him for a moment, and then went on quietly. "A week ago, while you were in Gallipoli, we discovered a plot to murder you there. You were to be kidnapped and knifed. The whole thing was clumsy and amateurish. We were able to persuade the arrested men to tell us that they had been paid by a German agent, a man named Müller, about whom we have known for some time. I called Mr. Kopeikin in to see me and told him about it, and suggested that nothing should be said to you, nothing to be gained by upsetting you while you were so hard at work. I made a mistake. When Mr. Kopeikin telephoned me immediately he knew of this fresh attempt, I realized I had underestimated Müller. He tried again. I have no doubt he will try a third time if we give him a chance. Do you understand now, Mr. Graham? It is perfectly simple. Someone is trying to kill you." The Colonel got up suddenly and extracted from a filing cabinet a yellow folder. He dropped it on the desk in front of Graham. "Inside that folder you will find photographs of 15 men. I want you to look at those photographs and see if you recognize any of the faces." Graham opened the folder. There was a series of white cards in it. Each had a photograph gummed to it. Graham turned the cards over, slowly and hopelessly. If he had ever seen any of these men in his life, he could not recognize them now. The next moment his heart jolted violently. There was no mistaking the doughy features, the small, deep-set eyes, and the crumpled suit. "This man," he said, "he was at the cabaret. The girl, Maria, drew my attention to him while we were dancing. She said he kept looking at me." Colonel Hackey took the card. "He is Romanian. His name is supposed to be Banat. He is a professional gunman. There are men who are natural killers. Banat is one of them. There can be no doubt that it was Banat who was waiting for you in your room. But can't you arrest this man?" Colonel Hackey threw up his hands. "On what charge can we arrest him? We have no evidence against him. What we must think of now is how to get you home safely. I have a sleeping berth on the 11 o'clock train. It seems to me the sooner I leave here, the better." The Colonel frowned. "Let me tell you. If you were to take that or any other train, you would be dead before you reached Belgrade. There are innumerable stops between the Turkish and French frontiers. Your assassin might get on at any of them. It will be best if you go by sea." There is an Italian shipping line which runs a weekly service of small cargo boats between here and Genoa. They carry few passengers, and we can make sure every one of them is harmless before the boat is given its clearance papers. When you get to Genoa, you have only the short train journey to the French frontier, out of reach of German agents. You can be in London by Monday morning." Graham hesitated. He looked at Kopeikin, but he was staring at his fingernails. "I don't know, Colonel. I ought to get in touch with the British consul before deciding anything." "Mr. Graham, I am not asking you to decide anything. You are, I must remind you, of great value to my country. If you do not agree to follow my instructions, I shall have no alternative but to arrest you, have an order issued for your deportation, and put on board the Sestre Levante under guard. I hope I make myself clear." Graham felt himself reddening. "Quite clear. Would you like to handcuff me now?"
"I think, my dear fellow," put in Kopeikin hastily, "that I should do as the Colonel suggests. It is the best thing. By the way," he went on mildly, "have you a gun in your luggage?" "Good heavens, no." "Then you had better take this." He pulled a small revolver out of his overcoat. "I put it in my pocket after you telephoned. It is fully loaded."
Graham took the gun and stared at it. "I've never fired one of these things."
"It is easy. You release the safety catch, point it, pull the trigger, and hope for the best."
Colonel Hackey grinned.
"A little melodrama is sometimes unavoidable, Mr. Graham."
On the Sestre Levante, the gangway was down, and the last of the 9 passengers, a couple who sounded middle-aged and French, had come aboard, and were in the cabin next to Graham's. Their voices penetrated the thin wooden bulkhead with dismaying ease.
"The sheets are damp?" "No, it is simply that they are cold. You may sleep as you wish, but do not complain to me about your kidneys. Cold sheets do not harm the kidneys, chérie."
With a sigh, Graham opened the door and went on deck. The ship had turned and was taking the wind on her port side. The dock lights were receding. He would, he told himself, be able to laugh at the whole business soon. He was on his way home. As he reached the end of the deck, he saw that a woman in a fur coat had come out of the saloon and was walking towards him. The light was dim, and she was within a few yards of him before he recognized her. It was Josette. For a moment they stared blankly at each other. Then she laughed. "Merciful God! It is the Englishman! What happened to your first-class compartment on the Orient Express?" He smiled. "Kopeikin thought a little sea air would do me good. What happened to your second-class compartment?"
"Did I say that I was travelling by train?"
Graham flushed. "No, of course not. In any case, I am delighted to see you again. I have been wondering what I should do if the Hôtel des Belges was closed." She looked at him archly. "Ah, you were really going to telephone me in Paris?" "Of course. It was understood." She began to walk along the deck. "Tell me, truthfully, why you are on this boat." He had a sudden absurd desire to tell her the truth. "I am travelling this way to avoid someone who's trying to shoot me." She stopped dead. He held up his bandaged hand. A bullet grazed it. She frowned. "It is very bad luck to joke that way." "I apologize," said Graham mildly. "I cut my hand with a razor." "In Algiers, José saw a throat cut from ear to ear with a razor. He will tell you about it if you ask him." José is travelling with you, then? Naturally. And then with a sidelong look, he is my husband, but with José and me it is an arrangement. We are partners. He is jealous only when I neglect business for pleasure. Graham nearly laughed. The businessman's dream come true. The beautiful blonde dancer, married but unloved, something expensive going cheap. "It is getting cold," he said. "Shall we go inside and have a drink?" The saloon was a narrow room about 30 feet long. At the far end was a cubbyhole with half doors. The lower door had a strip of wood screwed to the top of it. This was the bar. "What would you like to drink, Mrs.?" began Graham tentatively. She laughed. "José's name is Galindo, but you must call me Josette. I would like some English whiskey and a cigarette." In the light of the saloon her fur coat looked cheap and old. He began, against his better judgment, to feel sorry for her. "How long have you been dancing?" "Since I was 10, 20 years ago. You see, I do not lie about my age. I was born in Serbia, but I say I am Hungarian. It sounds better." "And what about José?" "I met him in Berlin when I was dancing there." "Was this long ago?" 3 years. You ask questions, but you tell me nothing. I still do not know why you are here." He did not have to reply to this. Another passenger was advancing towards them. He was short, unkempt, with a heavy jowl and a fringe of scurfy grey hair round a bald pate. The boat had begun to roll slightly, and he clutched for support at the backs of chairs as he crossed the room.
"There is a lot of movement, eh?"
he said, as he subsided onto a seat. He had a smile, fixed like that of a ventriloquist's doll.
"I hear English spoken, and I am interested at once. You are English, sir?"
"Yes. And you?"
"Turkish. I go to London. I go to sell tobacco. My name is Mr. Kuvetli. I don't speak English very well."
"My name is Graham. This is Senora Galindo." Without getting up, Kuvetli bowed from the waist.
"My wife does not speak English any, so I do not bring her. She has not been to England."
"But you have?"
3 times to sell tobacco. It is good business. We produce best."
He plunged his hand into his pocket and produced a leather cigarette case.
"Please try cigarette made from tobacco by Pazar and Co."
He extended the case to Josette. She turned to Graham. "I would like one of your cigarettes, please." It was a deliberate insult, but Mr. Kuvetli only smiled a little more. Graham took one of the cigarettes. "Thank you. Will you have a drink, Mr. Kuvetli?"
"No, thank you. I must go arrange my cabin."
With a bow to each of them, he got to his feet and made his way to the door. Graham lit his cigarette. Was it necessary to be so rude? "Turks. I do not like them. They are heathen animals. And he does not get angry. He only smiles. It is stuffy in here. I should like to walk outside again. You may come with me if you wish. I think I should unpack my suitcase. I shall see you at dinner. José will be with me. He will want to play cards. He will win. I have warned you." He returned to his cabin and stayed there until dinner. He was feeling better. He had an appetite. He was prepared to take an interest in his fellow passengers. Most of them were already in their places when he entered the saloon. Mr. Kuvetli, a man and a woman who looked as if they might be the French couple from the cabin next to his, Josette, and with her, José. There was about them all an air of tension which seemed to be more than the ordinary restraint of passengers sitting together for the first time. The steward showed him to another table. One of the places was already filled by an elderly man. He was thick, round-shouldered, with a pale, heavy face and white hair. As Graham sat down next to him, he looked up. "Mr. Graham?" "Yes, good evening." "My name is Dr. Fritz Heller. I should explain that I am a German." Graham understood now the air of tension. "The two French people were placed here. They objected to eating with the enemy, insulted me, and moved. If you wish to do the same, I suggest you do so now. On the other hand, you may find the situation humorous. I do myself. Perhaps I am not as patriotic as I should be." Graham picked up the menu. "I believe it is the custom for belligerents on neutral ground to avoid embarrassing the neutrals. There seems no reason why we should make a difficult situation unpleasant." "Very sensible. I must admit I am glad of your company. My wife suffers from the sea and will stay in her cabin this evening." "Have you been long in Turkey?" "A few weeks. I came there from Persia. Archaeology. I was investigating the pre-Islamic cultures in the search for a logic of history. We should have made of the past a mirror to see the future. Unfortunately, we are returning the way we came. Human understanding is re-entering the monastery." He chuckled. "I am old. I can afford the luxury of despair." He dropped his voice. "Here are the other two passengers." They looked like mother and son. The woman was about 50 and unmistakably Italian. Her son, a lad of about 18, was very attentive to her. It was obvious that they wished to be left to themselves. Graham could hear José at the next table. "War," he was saying, "makes it difficult to earn money. Let Germany have all the territory she desires. Let her choke with territory. Then let us go to Berlin and enjoy ourselves. War is not businesslike." "The voice of the fool," murmured Haller, "with the tongue of the wise. I think that I will go and see how my wife is." Graham finished his meal virtually alone. He went out on deck to get some air before going to bed. The lights on land were distant now. He lit a cigarette. As he threw the match away, he saw that Josette and José were coming over to him. "So you are here," she said accusingly. "This is José." "It is a pleasure to meet you, Senor Galindo. I very much enjoyed the dancing of you and your wife." José laughed. "It is nothing. The place was impossible." He made a loud noise with his lips. "José is very vulgar," commented Josette. Graham said to José, "Have you made this trip before?" José stared suspiciously. "No, why? Have you?" "No," said Graham. "I am tired of this ship," José announced. "It is dull and dirty, and it vibrates excessively. Do you play poker?" "I have played, but I don't play very well." "I told you," cried Josette. "She thinks," said José sourly, "that because I win, I cheat. I do not care a damn what she thinks. People are not compelled by law to play cards with me. Why should they squeal like stuck pigs when they lose?" "It is," Graham admitted tactfully, "illogical." "We will play now, if you like," said José, as if someone had accused him of refusing a challenge. "If you don't mind, I'd sooner leave it until tomorrow. I'm rather tired. In fact, I think that I shall go to bed now." Josette pouted. "So soon? There is only one interesting person on the boat, and he goes to bed. Why did you sit next to that German at dinner?" "He did not object. Why should I? He is a very pleasant and intelligent old fellow. He is German. For you, no German should be pleasant. The English are not serious about these things." José turned suddenly on his heel. "I am cold," he said. "I shall go and drink some brandy." When José reached the top of the companionway, he turned and belched deliberately before descending. "He is gone," said Josette. "I am glad. He has very bad manners." She drew in her breath and looked up at the clouds. "It is a lovely night. I do not see why you wish to go to bed. It is early." This corner of the deck below the bridge was dark. She leaned with her back to the rail so that Graham was facing her. She sighed. "You are very mysterious. You have still not told me why you were travelling on this boat. It cannot be because it is cheap. Your clothes are expensive. Graham could not see her face, but he could smell her scent and the mustiness of her fur coat. He said, "I can't think why you should be interested." "But I am." He knew that if he wanted to, he could kiss her, and she would return the kiss. He was surprised to find that he did not reject the idea instantaneously. The prospect of her full lips against his was more than attractive. He was cold and tired. She was near, and he could sense the warmth of her body. It could do no one any harm if... She smiled. "Yes, my dear sir, you are tired. Good night." He went below, amused and irritated by his thoughts. Outside the door he came face to face with Mr. Covetley.
"Mr. Graham, you go to Athens when we stop tomorrow?"
"I was thinking of doing so." Covetley hesitated. His smile became oily.
"You are in a position, Mr. Graham, to do me a service. I do not know Athens. Would you allow me to go with you?"
"Of course, I should be glad of the company."
"I am most grateful. I will find out exact time. You leave that to me."
"Then that's settled. Good night, Mr. Covetley."
"Good night, sir, and I thank you for the favour."
Graham went to his cabin. For a few minutes he lay on his back, enjoying the gradual relaxing of his muscles. The French couple entered their cabin. The woman began.
"That girl and that man? They say they are dancers, but I ask you?"
"She is pretty."
"You need not think little thoughts. She is interested in the Englishman. I do not like him. He likes the Germans. You exaggerate. An old man like that? I would have sat with him myself. I will not believe it."
Graham heard little more. Before he could make up his mind to cough loudly, he was asleep. Next day was Aegean, intensely coloured in the sun, and with small pink clouds drifting in a bleached indigo sky. It was not until the gong sounded for lunch and Haller came in that Graham remembered that he had done nothing about changing his place at table. The German nodded in a friendly way as Graham sat down beside him. "I did not expect to have your company today. I take it as a compliment." "How is your wife?" "Better, though she is not yet prepared to face a meal. She took a walk this morning. I showed her the sea." "Shall you go ashore this afternoon? Do you know the city?" "A little. I know Salamis better. That is now their big naval base, isn't it?" Graham said yes, rather too carelessly. Haller smiled slightly. "I beg your pardon. I am on the point of being indiscreet. I shall go ashore to get some books and cigarettes. Can I get anything for you?" "It is very kind of you, but there is nothing." "Are you going alone?" "Mr. Covetley, the Turkish gentleman at the next table, has asked me to show him round. He has never been to Athens." Haller raised his eyebrows. "I talked with him this morning. He speaks German quite well and knows Berlin a little. He speaks English, too. He seems to have travelled a lot." Haller grunted. "I should have thought that a Turk who had travelled a lot would have been to Athens." "He sells tobacco. Greece grows its own tobacco." "Yes, of course. I had not thought of that. I talked with him for 20 minutes. He has a way of talking without saying anything. His conversation consists of agreements or indisputable statements." "I suppose," said Graham, "it's something to do with his being a salesman. The world is my customer, and the customer is always right." "He interests me," said Haller. "In my opinion, he is too simple to be true. The smile is a little too stupid, the conversation a little too evasive. He tells you things about himself within the first 10 minutes of your meeting him, and then tells you no more. That is curious. He makes me think of a man who has set out to create a definite impression of himself in people's minds. He is a man who wishes to be underrated." "But why? He's not selling us tobacco." "Perhaps, as you suggest, He regards the world as his customer. But you will have an opportunity of probing a little this afternoon." Haller smiled. "I must ask your pardon. I am a bad traveller who has had to do a lot of travelling. To pass the time, I have learned to play a game. I compare my own first impressions of my fellow travellers with what I can find out about them. If you are right, you score a point. If you are wrong, you lose one?" "Precisely. Actually, I enjoy losing more than winning. It is an old man's game." "And what is your impression of Senor Galindo?" Haller frowned. "He is not interesting." Graham's reply was interrupted by the entrance of Galindo himself, looking as if he had just got out of bed. He was followed by the Italian mother and son. The conversation became desultory and over-polite. Graham made up his mind to walk round the boat deck 10 times. His hand had ceased throbbing, and he could bend his fingers a little. More important was the fact that the feeling of moving in a nightmare had now gone. Yesterday was years away. He had completed his 4th circuit when he saw Mr. Couvetly and the French couple by the rail, watching the gulls following the ship. Mr. Couvetly saw him and waved. He went over to them. "Good day, madame, monsieur." They greeted him guardedly, but Mr. Couvetly was enthusiastic.
"It is good day. I look forward to our excursion. Permit me to present Monsieur and Madame Matisse."
Matisse was a sharp-featured man of 50 or so with a permanent frown, but his smile, when it came, was good, and his eyes were alive. His wife wore an expression which said she was determined to keep her temper, however sorely it were tried. She was like her voice. "Do you come from London, monsieur?" asked Matisse. "No, the north of England. I've been in Turkey for a few weeks on business." "We have been there 3 years," said Madame Matisse. "It was never any better than the day we arrived." "To us," said Matisse, "war will be strange after so many years. They say the towns in France are darker than the last time." "The towns are damnably dark both in France and England."
"It is war," said Matisse.
"It is the filthy Boche," said his wife.
"War," put in Mr. Couvetly, "is terrible, but the Allies must win."
"It is easy to say the Allies must win," said Matisse, "but they still have the fighting to do. I see the newspapers from France, with the blanks in them to show where the censor has been at work. These newspapers say France is fighting with England against the Nazis for democracy and liberty." "And you don't believe that?" Graham asked.
"I believe that the peoples of France and England are so fighting,
but is that the same thing? I am an invalid of the last war. I do not have to fight in this one, but I can think." Mr. Couvetly interrupted them.
"Ah, see, there is Greece."
They looked. There, sure enough, was Greece. The gangway thudded into position, and Mr. Couvetly clambered down it nervously. Graham followed. Beyond the customs shed there was a fly-blown old Fiat, with a notice on it, saying that an hour's tour of the sights and antiquities of Athens cost 500 drachmas. Graham thought of trains and trams, of the hill up to the Acropolis, of the exhausting boredom of sightseeing on foot. "I think," he said, "that we will take this car." Mr. Couvetly looked worried.
"It is very expensive. 500? But that is for 4 persons. We are 2.
Graham laughed. "I doubt if the driver will look at it that way. I don't suppose it costs him any less to take 2. Mr. Couvetly said, "I have little Greek. You will permit me to ask him?" "Of course. Go ahead." Mr. Couvetly strode forward. He began to speak. He spoke Greek fluently. There was no doubt of it. Graham saw the surprised look on the driver's face, replaced by one of fury, as a torrent of words poured from Mr. Couvetly's lips. He was disparaging the car. He pointed to every defect, from a patch of rust on the luggage grid to a small tear in the upholstery. He paused for breath, and the angry driver seized the opportunity of replying. He shouted and thumped the door with his fist to emphasize his remarks. Mr. Covetley smiled and returned to the attack. The driver spat on the ground. Mr. Covetley replied with a short, sharp burst of fire. The driver flung up his hands, disgusted but defeated. Mr. Covetley returned to Graham. "Price," he reported simply, "is now 300 drachmas." "Did you say," said Graham, "that you had never been in Greece before?" Mr. Covetley's smile was bland. "I know little Greek," he said. "I was born in Izmir." The tour began. The Greek drove fast and with dash, flinging a running commentary over his right shoulder as they went. They stopped by the Theseion, and again on the Acropolis, where they got out and walked around. Mr. Covetley's curiosity seemed inexhaustible. He insisted on a century-by-century history of the Parthenon. At last they got back in the car, and were whisked round to the Theatre of Dionysus, the Olympian, and the Royal Palace. It was now 4 o'clock. They stopped in the Syntagma, changed some money, and Graham bought cigarettes and books. When they got back to the square, at Mr. Covetley's suggestion they sat down at a table to drink coffee before returning to the port. Mr. Covetley surveyed the square regretfully. "It is very nice," he said with a sigh. "One would like to stay longer." Graham remembered what Haller had said about Mr. Covetley's evasions. "Which is your favourite city, Mr. Covetley?" "Oh, that is difficult to say. All cities have their magnificences. I like all cities." He breathed the air. "It is most kind of you to bring me here today." Graham stuck to the point. "But surely you have some preference?" Mr. Covetley looked anxious. "It is so difficult. I like London very much. Personally, I like Paris better. Ah, yes, Paris is also magnificent." Feeling rather baffled, Graham sipped his coffee. Then he had another idea. "What do you think of Senor Galindo, Mr. Covetley?" "Senor Galindo, this is so difficult. I do not know him. His manner is strange." "His manner," said Graham, "is damnably offensive. Don't you agree?" "I do not like Senor Galindo very much," conceded Mr. Covetley, "but he is Spanish." "What can that have to do with it? The Spanish are an exceedingly polite race." "Ah, I have not been to Spain." He looked at his watch. "It is 4:15. Perhaps we should go now?" Graham nodded wearily. If Haller wanted Mr. Covetley probed, he could do the probing himself. Graham's personal opinion was that Mr. Covetley was an ordinary bore, whose conversation, such as it was, sounded a little unreal because he used languages with which he was unfamiliar. Mr. Covetley insisted on paying for the coffee. Mr. Covetley insisted on paying the fare back to the wharf. By 4:45 they were on board again. An hour later, Graham stood on deck watching the pilot's boat chugging back towards the land. The Frenchman, Matisse, who was leaning on the rail a few feet away, turned his head. "Well, that's that. 2 more days, and we shall be in Genoa. Did you enjoy your excursion ashore this afternoon, monsieur?" "Oh, yes, thank you, it was—" But he never finished telling Matisse what it was. A man had come out of the saloon door and was standing blinking at the setting sun. "Yes," said Matisse, "we have a new passenger. He arrived while you were ashore. I expect he is Greek." Graham could not answer. He knew the man was not Greek. He knew that beneath the grey raincoat there was a crumpled brown suit with padded shoulders. He knew that this man's name was Banat. Graham said, "I don't feel well. Will you excuse me, please?" He turned and, without looking again at the man by the saloon door, went below to his cabin. He locked the door when he got inside. Somehow, Banat had discovered that he was on the Sestri Levante. An inquiry made at the Wagon Lee and shipping company offices would have been enough. Graham was caught like a rat in a trap. Bernat would not miss twice. The man was a professional murderer. He would have his reputation to consider, to say nothing of his fee. Graham tried to pull himself together. He told himself, "There's a way out of this. You've got to think. If you can get off the ship..." The purser, a tall, middle-aged Italian with the stump of a cigar in his mouth, was sitting in his shirt sleeves before a typewriter. He looked up with a frown as Graham knocked. "I wish to see the captain at once. It is absolutely necessary that I am put ashore immediately." The purser put his cigar down and turned in his chair. "I regret, Mr. Graham. It is too late. The pilot boat has gone." "I know. I realize that under ordinary circumstances it would be out of the question, but the circumstances are exceptional." "Are you ill?" "If you will arrange for me to see the captain, I will explain. All I am asking is that you put back a short way and ask for a pilot boat. I am willing and able to pay." The purser smiled in an exasperated way. "This is a ship, sir, not a taxi. We carry cargo and run to a schedule. Let me assure you, nothing but reasons of life and death will suffice to stop any ship for the convenience of one passenger." "You say you have reasons. You can only have thought of these reasons within the last 10 minutes. "Very well," snapped Graham. "I have just found out there is a man on the ship who is here for the express purpose of murdering me." The purser's face went blank. "I suppose you have decided I'm either mad or drunk. His name is Bernat. He is Romanian. He is the man who came aboard this afternoon." "That is Mr. Mavrodopoulos. He is a Greek businessman." "That may be what his passport says. If you radio Colonel Hackey of the Turkish police, he will confirm what I say." "This is an Italian ship. We are not in Turkish waters. We can refer such a matter only to the Italian police. The matter must be left until we reach Genoa." "I'm telling you that the man intends to kill me." The purser got to his feet. He looked Graham in the eye. "There are two charitable explanations. Either you have mistaken Mr. Mavrodopoulos for someone else, or you have invented this story because for some private reason you wish to be put ashore. In any case, the ship stops at Genoa and not before. If you will close the door as you leave," said the purser happily. Almost sick with anger and fear, Graham went back to his cabin. He tried to think reasonably. He could still go to the captain, but it would be useless. The captain would probably receive his story with even less sympathy, and he would still have no proof that what he said was true. He'd got to think of some way out. Behind Bernat was a German agent named Muller, and behind him were the Nazis. If other Englishmen could die for their country, surely he could manage to stay alive. He could stay here in his cabin, keep the door locked. He could defend himself. Yes, Kopeikin's revolver. He had put it among the clothes in his suitcase. He got it out and weighed it in his hand. He had never handled a revolver in his life before. He took the cartridges out and pulled the trigger once or twice. It was not easy with his bandaged hand, but it could be done. As long as he was careful, he would be all right. The real danger would begin when he got off the ship at Genoa. The thing to do there would be to go straight to the British consul. He had one priceless advantage over the enemy. Bernat did not know that he was identified. He would be assuming that he could bide his time, do his work between Genoa and the French frontier. By the time he discovered his mistake, It would be too late. It was out of the question for Graham to skulk in his cabin. That would arouse immediate suspicion. He must make sure that if he were not in his cabin with the door locked, he was with one of the other passengers. He took the wallet out of his breast pocket and put the revolver there. The shape of it could be seen from the outside. Bernat must not see that he was armed. The revolver could stay in the cabin. He stood up, bracing himself. He had to face a man who had tried once to kill him, and who was going to try again, and behave as if he had never seen or heard of him before. He'd go straight to the saloon and have a drink. Josette and José were there with drinks in front of them, listening to Matisse. "And so," he was saying, "the big newspapers of the right are owned by those whose interest is to see that France spends her wealth on arms, and that the ordinary people do not understand too much of what goes on behind the scenes." His wife was listening with tight-lipped disapproval. José was openly yawning. Josette was nodding, but her face lit up when she saw Graham. "And where has our Englishman been?" she said. Graham ordered a whisky. "I've been in my cabin, recovering from the afternoon's excitement." "You've been ill?" she demanded. "It is the ventilation," said Madame Matisse. "I myself have felt nausea and a headache since I got on the ship." Matisse grinned. "Bah, it is seasickness." "If I am sick," said his wife, "it is of you." At that moment Bernat came through the door from the promenade deck. He stood there, his raincoat hanging open, his hat in his hand, like a man who has strayed into a picture gallery out of the rain. Graham's heart drummed at the base of his skull. This was the executioner. Bernat walked slowly over to the bar. He passed close to Madame Matisse, and Graham saw her frown. Then he caught the smell. It was attar of roses, and very strong. The man reeked of it. "It is the ventilation," Madame Matisse repeated. "There is," conceded her husband, "a certain stuffiness. But what can one expect for so little money?" "So little?" exclaimed José. "It is expensive enough for me." Graham listened with half his mind. He knew that sooner or later Bernat must look at him, and he wanted to see that look. Bernat raised a brandy to his lips and drank. As he put the glass down, he looked directly at Graham, inspecting him, as the hangman inspects the man whom he is to execute, mentally weighing him, calculating the drop. The dinner gong sounded. Graham went to his table. He exchanged reserved greetings with the two Italians. It was not until he had sat down that he noticed that an extra place had been laid beside them. His first impulse was to get up and walk out. The fact that Bernat was on the ship was bad enough, to have to eat at the same table. But everything depended on his behaving normally. He would have to stay. Haller came in and sat down beside him. "Good evening, Mr. Graham. Did you enjoy Athens?" "Yes, thanks. Mr. Couvetly was impressed. It appears that he was born in Izmir. Apart from that, I discovered nothing." "That is disappointing. I had hopes—" He broke off. "I see that we have another passenger." Bernat approached, looked round the table, and sat down. "Mavrodopoulos," he said. The smell of attar of roses came across the table. Haller's look of disgust was almost funny. He said, "Haller, Signora and Signor Bertonelli, and this is Mr. Graham." Bernat nodded and said, "I have travelled a long way today, from Salonika." Graham made an effort. "I should have thought," he said, "that it would be easier to go to Genoa by train from Salonika." His voice sounded strange in his own ears. There was a bowl of raisins in the centre of the table, and Bernat put some in his mouth before replying, "I don't like trains." He looked at Haller. "You're German?" Haller frowned. "I am." "It is a good country. Italy is good too. When I was last in Rome, I saw a magnificent parade with guns and armoured cars and aeroplanes. The aeroplanes were a great sight and made one think of God. Graham wondered if a jury trying this man for murder would find him insane. Probably not. He killed for money, and the law did not think that a man who killed for money was insane. Bernat put his food in his mouth as if he enjoyed it. When he chewed, he would look round the room, like a dog over a plate of scraps. He was not insane. He was an animal, and dangerous. The meal came to an end. Haller, as usual, went to his wife. Graham left at the same time, and went out on deck. He was over the first hurdle. He had sat face to face with Bernat without giving himself away. There was a step behind him, and he swung round, his nerves jumping. It was Josette. She linked her arm in his. "Now, we will walk, and you shall tell me what is the matter." He looked at her quickly. "What do you mean?" "You will not tell me how you came to be on this ship. You will not tell me what happened today to make you so nervous. I am sorry, but I have seen people who are afraid before." If she knew a frightened man when she saw one, then so did Bernat. A fantastic suggestion was taking root in his mind. It was absurd, of course. He couldn't trust her. He couldn't trust anybody. "Do you remember," he said, "I told you I came on this ship to avoid someone who was trying to shoot me, and that this," he held up his right hand, "was a bullet wound? I remember. It was a bad joke. It happened to be true." "But you are an engineer," she said. "What have you done that someone should wish to kill you?" "I have done nothing. I just happened to be on important business. Some competitors don't want me to return to England." "Who are these people?" "I only know of one. His name is Muller. The Turkish police told me he is a German agent. While I was ashore this afternoon, another passenger came aboard, Mavrodopoulos. His real name is Bernat. He is the professional killer who shot at me in Istanbul." She was silent for a moment, and then she said, "You must go to the captain." "I've tried to see the captain. I got as far as the purser. He thinks I'm either crazy or lying." "What are you going to do?" "Nothing for the moment. He doesn't know that I know who he is. I think he will wait until we get to Genoa before he tries again." "But I think he does know that you suspect him. When we were in the saloon before dinner, this man was watching you. Mr. Covetli was watching you also. You looked so curious." His stomach turned over. "You mean I looked frightened to death? I admit it. I'm not used to people trying to kill me." She gripped his arm. "José has a revolver. I will try to get it for you. I have a revolver. It's in my suitcase. It shows in my pocket. I did not want him to see that I knew I was in danger." "If you carry the revolver, you will be in no danger. Let him see it. With types like that, you must show that you are dangerous, and then they are afraid." He said, "When we get to Paris, Josette, I shall give you the best dinner it is possible to buy." She came close to him. "I don't want you to give me anything, chérie. I want you to like me." His left hand touched the belt in her coat. Her body moved suddenly, pressing against him. The next moment his arms were round her, and he was kissing her. When his arms grew tired, she leaned back against the rail. She began to speak very softly. "This boat is very small. The cabins are small. The walls are thin, and there are people everywhere. Paris is very large. There are nice hotels with big rooms and thick walls." He got to his cabin feeling a good deal more cheerful. How stupid he'd been. With men like Bernat, it was dangerous to be subtle. If a dog saw that you were nervous, he bit you. From now on, he would carry the revolver. What was more, he would use it if Bernat tried any funny business. He bent down to pull the suitcase from under the bunk. Suddenly he stopped. His nostrils had caught the sweet, clawing smell of attar of roses. For a moment he remained motionless. Then, with shaking fingers, he tore at the latches on the suitcase and flung back the lid. The revolver was gone. He got into his bunk and lay there, staring at the cracks in the asbestos round a steam pipe which crossed the ceiling. He could taste Josette's lipstick. The taste was all that was left to remind him of the self-assurance with which he had returned to the cabin. In Berlin, there was a man whose name he did not know who had condemned him to death. In Sofia, there was a man named Muller who had been instructed to carry out the sentence. A few yards away in cabin number 9 was Bernat, the executioner. He tried to think of Stephanie, his wife, and found that he could not. The things of which she was a part, his house, his friends, had ceased to exist. He was a man alone, transported into a strange land, with death for its frontiers. He got out of his bunk and sat down to smoke a cigarette. Lying prone increased his sense of helplessness. He would spend the rest of the night like that, sitting and smoking. And then he remembered something Josette had said. "José has a revolver. I will try to get it for you." He drew a deep breath. He was saved. José had a revolver. Josette would get it for him. He would be able to sit down to luncheon with the thing bulging in his pocket. Bernat would get a surprise. He yawned and put out his cigarette. He lay down once more. Within 5 minutes he was asleep. When he awoke, it was 9 o'clock. He drank coffee slowly, smoked a cigarette, and had a hot bath. By the time he was dressed, it was 10 o'clock. He put on his coat and left the cabin. The alleyway onto which the cabin opened was only just wide enough for 2 persons to pass. He was within a yard or 2 of the end when he came face to face with Bernat. By taking a pace backwards, he could have given Graham room to pass, but he made no attempt to do so. He stopped, and then very slowly he put his hands in his pockets and leaned against the bulkhead. Graham, his heart pounding, stayed where he was. Bernat nodded. "Good morning. It is very fine weather today. For you, an Englishman, it must be very agreeable to see the sun." He had shaved, and his pasty jowl gleamed with unrinsed soap. The smell of attar of roses came from him in waves. "Most agreeable," said Graham. "Excuse me." He went to push by to the stairs. Bernat moved, blocking the way. "I was anxious to ask you about your hand. What is the matter with it?" Graham met the small, dangerous eyes staring insolently into his. "It is a small wound," he said calmly. "A bullet wound, to be exact. Some dirty thief took a shot at me in Istanbul. He was either a bad shot or frightened. He missed." The small eyes did not flicker, but an ugly little smile twisted the mouth. "You must be ready to shoot back next time." "I shall shoot back." The smile widened. "You carry a pistol, then?" "Naturally. And now, if you will excuse me." He walked forward, intending to shoulder the man out of the way, but Bernat moved. "Be very careful," he said, and laughed. Graham paused and looked back. He said, "These scum don't risk their skins with an armed man." The grin faded from Bernat's face. Without replying, he turned and went on to his cabin. By the time Graham reached the deck, reaction had set in. His legs seemed to have gone to jelly, and he was sweating. Haller was there with his wife on his arm. He said good morning, but Graham did not want to talk to anyone but the girl. He went on up to the boat deck. She was there, She greeted him with a smile. "Something has happened," he said. The smile faded from her lips. "When I got back to my cabin last night, I found that my revolver had been stolen. Bernat had been in the cabin. I could smell that scent of his. You said that José had a revolver and that you might be able to get it for me?" She hesitated. Then she said, "Very well, I will try. It is in his box in the cabin. He is in the saloon." They went down and stood for a moment by the rail at the foot of the companionway. He pressed her hand. "My dear Josette, I can't tell you how grateful I am to you." She smiled. "You shall tell me that in Paris." He watched her go, and then turned to lean against the rail. He stared for a time at the long bow wave streaming out and away. Someone turned the corner at the end of the deck and came towards him. It was Haller. The old man stopped. "One's tastes change," he said. "To see the land from a ship or to see a ship from the land, I used to like both. Now I dislike both. When the man reaches my age, he grows to resent the movement of everything except the respiratory muscles which keep him alive. Movement is change, and for an old man, change means death." "And the immortal soul?" asked Graham. Haller sniffed. "Even that which we commonly regard as immortal dies sooner or later. One day the last Titian and the last Beethoven quartet will cease to exist. The canvas and the printed notes may remain, but the works will have died with the last eye and ear accessible to their messages." He turned his head as a door opened. It was Josette, standing there looking uncertainly from one to the other of them. "Excuse me," said Haller. "I must see my wife. She is still unwell." "Of course," said Graham. Josette came over to him as Haller went. "What did he want, the old man?" she whispered. "He was talking about life and death." Something in her face set his heart going like a hammer. She shook her head. "The box was locked. He has the keys." "Why do you look at me like that? I cannot help it if he keeps the box locked." "No, you cannot help it." He knew now that she had not intended to get the revolver. She couldn't be blamed. He had asked too much of her. Now, in God's name, what was he going to do? She rested her hand on his arm. "You need not worry. This man does not carry a gun. He was going up the stairs in front of me just now. His clothes are tight. If he carried a revolver, I would have seen the shape of it." "But a small gun—" He stopped. A 9mm self-loading pistol would not be a small gun. It would weigh about 2 pounds and would be bulky. "He'll have left his gun in his cabin," he said. She looked him in the eyes. "I could see that he does not go to his cabin for a long time. José will do it. I will not have to tell José anything about you. I will tell him that I saw this man open a wallet with a lot of money in it. José will see that he plays cards." "When can you do this?" "This evening will be best. It will be better if we are not seen together this afternoon." She leaned against him. "There is no one looking. Kiss me." It was after 9 o'clock, and for the past half hour Graham had been sitting near the door of the saloon, pretending to read a book. Bernat was talking to Josette and José. José had a pack of cards in his hand. Then they sat down at the card table. Josette looked across the room. Graham waited a moment, then when he saw them cutting for the deal, he got slowly to his feet and walked out. 2 minutes, 3 at the most, and it would be over. He would have the gun, and he would be safe. He had only to keep his head. He had decided that any sort of stealth was out of the question. He must walk straight to the cabin, open the door, and go in without hesitation. He reached the door of number 9, paused for barely a second, and then went in. When he had shut the door behind him and put up the latch, he looked round. The porthole was closed, and the air reeked of attar of roses. Apart from the scent, there were only 2 indications that the cabin was occupied: the grey raincoat hanging behind the door, and a battered suitcase under the lower berth. He ran his hands over the raincoat. There was nothing in the pockets. He turned his attention to the suitcase. It was unlocked. The thing was crammed with filthy shirts and underwear, brightly coloured silk handkerchiefs, a pair of black shoes without laces, a scent spray, and a jar of ointment. The gun was not there. He shut the case and opened the wardrobe. Nothing but a pair of dirty socks. He was getting worried. He had been so sure that the gun would be there. If what Josette had said were true, it must be there somewhere. He looked round for other hiding places. There were the mattresses. He ran his hands along the springs beneath them. Nothing. There was the waste compartment below the washing cabinet. Again, nothing. He glanced at his watch. He had been there 4 minutes. He looked round again, desperately. It must be in there. But he had looked everywhere. He returned feverishly to the suitcase. 2 minutes later, he slowly straightened his back. He knew now that the gun was not in the cabin, that the simple plan had been too simple, that nothing was changed. For a second or two he stood there helplessly, putting off the moment when he must finally admit his failure by leaving the cabin. Then the sound of footsteps in the alleyway jarred him into activity. The footsteps paused. There was the clink of a bucket being put down. Then the footsteps receded. He eased back the catch and opened the door. The alleyway was empty. A second later, he was walking back the way he had come. He had reached the foot of the stairs before he allowed himself to think. He had told Josette that he would go back to the saloon, but that meant seeing Bernat. He must have time to steady his nerves. He turned and walked back to his own cabin. He opened the door, took 1 step forward, and then stopped dead. Sitting on the bunk with his legs crossed and a book resting on his knee was Haller. He was wearing a pair of horn-rimmed reading glasses. He removed them very deliberately and looked up. "I've been waiting for you, Mr. Graham," he said cheerfully. Haller's other hand came from under the book. In it was a large, self-loading pistol. He held it up. "I think," he said, "that this is what you have been looking for." Graham looked from the gun to the face of the man who was holding it. "I don't understand," he said, and put out his hand, and then stopped. The gun was now pointing at him, and Haller's forefinger was on the trigger. Haller shook his head. "No, Mr. Graham, supposing you sit down here on the bed." Graham strove to conceal the deadly sickness that was stealing over him. He felt he must be going mad. Colonel Hackey had examined the credentials of all the passengers who had embarked at Istanbul and reported that none of them had booked their journey less than 3 days prior to sailing. They were all harmless. "Remain standing by all means if it pleases you to do so." This was a new Haller, a slightly younger man. "You know, Mr. Graham, Bernat was very upset by his failure in Istanbul. Like all stupid people, he blames others for his own mistakes. He complains that you moved. He was still angry with you when he came on board, so I insisted on taking care of his pistol. I did not want anything premature to happen." "I wonder," said Graham, "if your name happens to be Muller." "Dear me." Muller raised his eyebrows. "I had no idea you were so well informed. I like myself as an archaeologist." He held up the book he had been reading. "I can recommend this. It is entitled The Sumerian Parthenon and is by Fritz Haller." "So there is a Haller?" "Yes. I was sorry to inconvenience him and his wife, but there was no other way. I could not have booked a passage at the last moment without attracting Hackey's attention. I therefore took over Haller's tickets and passport. He and his wife are good Germans. My only embarrassment has been the Armenian lady who is doing duty for Frau Haller. She speaks little German and is virtually a half-wit. I have been forced to keep her out of the way." He produced a cigarette case. "Now do please sit down and smoke. It will do you good. Your nerves have been a little jumpy today." Graham leaned against the door. "The best way I can describe my state of mind is to tell you I have been seriously considering kicking you in the teeth." Muller settled himself a little more comfortably. He was fitting a cigarette into an amber holder, as if he had time to waste. "I like you, Mr. Graham," he said. "You behaved gracefully over that awkwardness at the dinner table. You listened politely to my carefully memorized recitations. You are a clever engineer. And yet—" he lit his cigarette, "I must tell you that, as things stand at present, you will be dead within minutes of your landing at Genoa." Graham said, "As things stand at present." Muller smiled. "You have gone to the heart of the matter. You need not die. There is an alternative, and by no means an unpleasant one. I can assure you that no one, with the possible exception of yourself, will be more delighted than I if we can dispose of this thing in a friendly way, as between businessmen. I hope you will believe I am sincere in that." Graham began to get angry. "I don't care a damn if you're sincere." Muller looked crestfallen. "No, I suppose you don't. You must have gathered that the completion of the work you are doing should be delayed for 6 weeks. The simplest way would be to kidnap you in Genoa and keep you under lock and key. But your employer and the Turkish government would make inquiries. The British Foreign Office would address demands to the Italian government. I might find myself in serious difficulties, especially when you are released and could tell your story. The straightforward course is to kill you. There is, however, a third possibility." Muller stubbed his cigarette out. "You might retire from business for 6 weeks of your own free will. You take a holiday." "Are you mad?" Muller smiled. "I see your difficulty. If you simply go into hiding, it may be rather awkward to explain matters when you return home. It will be necessary to practice a small deception. You have come from Turkey, where there have been several outbreaks of typhus. What could be more likely than that the moment you get ashore at Genoa, a mild attack of typhus should develop? You will be taken immediately to a private clinic, and the doctor there will write to your wife and employers in England. By the time anyone can get to see you, the crisis will have passed. In 6 weeks you will have recovered. All will be well again." "I see. I'm out of the way for 6 weeks and can't tell tales without showing myself up. Is that it?" "A crude way of putting it, but that is it. You would be the only patient, the medical staff, myself, Bernat, and another man. What do you think?" Graham said with deliberate ease, "I think you're bluffing. I shall repeat this conversation to the captain. My papers are in order. Yours are not, nor are Bernat's. You're relying on my fear." Muller did not move. He said, as if he were a surgeon musing over some complication, "The third officer has been telling me about your curious behavior over Mavrodopoulos. Wild allegations that he is a criminal named Banat who wants to kill you. There would be a certain unreality about the story that I too wanted to kill you. Isn't there a medical name for that sort of delusion? Mr. Graham, you may prefer lying dead in a gutter with a bullet in your back to spending 6 weeks in a villa on the Ligurian Riviera. Please do not deceive yourself. Those are the alternatives.
Graham smiled grimly. I still think you're bluffing. If that's all you have to say... Muller got slowly to his feet.
No, there is something else I should say. Colonel Hackey considered it advisable to install one of his agents on board to watch over you. Covetli is unprepossessing, but he has the reputation of being a clever little man.
Are you trying to tell me Covetli is a Turkish agent? Muller's pale blue eyes narrowed.
I wanted to see you before he made himself known to you. He did not, I think, find out who I was until today. He searched my cabin this evening. I have no doubt he will have evolved some plan for getting you to France safely. I warn you against telling him of the suggestion I have made to you. If you let Covetli into the secret, you will destroy your only chance of returning to England alive.
He smiled faintly and went to the door.
Good night, Mr. Graham.
Graham watched the door close and then sat on the bunk. He was conscious now more of humiliation than of fear. The enemy had been laughing up their sleeves at him. Muller and Banat had seen through him as if he were made of glass. As a measure of their contempt for him, it had been Muller who had informed him that Covetli was a Turkish agent. Covetli! It was funny. Josette would be amused. The cabin was stifling. He could think better if he had some air. He got up and put on his overcoat. On the shelter deck he stared out at the lights on the coast. They were near enough for him to see the movement of the boat in relation to them. Perhaps it was all a fantasy, born of anesthesia. He would become conscious again to find himself in a hospital bed. But the teak rail on which his hand rested was real enough. He gripped it in sudden anger. He should be thinking, making plans, deciding, instead of standing here mooning. There were footsteps on the deck behind him. It was Josette, her fur coat thrown over her shoulders, her face pale and anxious. "What has happened? Why were you so long?" "There was no gun there. I searched carefully." She sighed with relief. "He does not carry a gun. There is no gun in his cabin. He has not got a gun." She laughed. He knew now he did not want to talk to her about Muller. He wanted her to talk to him, believing that he could walk down the gangway at Genoa without fear. Afraid to create his own illusion, he could live in one of her making. He managed to smile. "Tell me what we shall do first when we arrive in Paris." She pressed his arm against her side. "When we get to Paris, we will go straight to an hotel I know. It is modern and respectable and not expensive. We will have champagne cocktails, and we must have good French food." He did not object to the picture she was painting. He would be safe and free, himself again, able to smile without stretching his nerves to breaking point. He was an engineer, not a secret agent. His business was to stay alive. 6 weeks on the Ligurian Riviera could not do any harm. It meant lying, of course. Lying to his wife, and to their friends, and to... For God's sake, what was he thinking? What he had been turning over in his mind was nothing less than treason. Josette was shaking his arm. "What is the matter?" "I've just remembered something," he muttered. "I have to write several business letters. I don't want to work while we're in Paris." She was apparently mollified. "If we go up on the top deck, you can kiss me."
Half an hour later, Graham walked to cabin number 3 and stood for a moment. Perhaps he should think again. Perhaps it would be better if he left it until morning. Perhaps... He raised his hand and knocked. Mr. Covetley opened the door. He stared at Graham blankly for a moment. Then his smile returned. "Mr. Graham, it is good to see you." Graham's heart sank. It was to this grubby little man with a stupid smile that he was proposing to commit his safety. He said, "I wonder if I could have a talk with you, Mr. Covetley." Mr. Covetley blinked a little shiftily. "Oh, yes, come in, please." Graham stepped into the cabin. Mr. Covetley smoothed out the blankets on his bunk. "Please, take a seat." Graham sat down. "I had a visit from Professor Haller this evening," he said, and then, remembering that the bulkheads were thin, glanced at them. "Cabins on both sides empty," Mr. Covetley remarked. "We can talk easily." He sat down beside Graham. "I was going to introduce myself tomorrow. Now Muller has saved me the trouble, I think." "According to Muller, you were a Turkish agent acting under Colonel Hackey's orders." "That is so." The smile had gone, and with it the bright-eyed stupidity. In its place was a firm, determined mouth and a pair of steady brown eyes. "What I cannot understand is why you did not approach me as soon as you knew Bernat was on the ship." "I suppose," Graham added, "you do know Bernat is on the ship?" "Yes, I know," said Mr. Covetley. "Colonel Hackey instructed me that your attitude to his efforts to protect you were unsympathetic, and that I would do better to remain unknown to you. Secondly, I wish to see what Bernat and Muller would do. You tell me Muller has talked to you. Excellent." Graham said, "Suppose you show me credentials. I've already made some silly mistakes in this trip. I don't intend to make any more." Mr. Covetley grinned. He turned to his jacket on the hook behind the door and produced from it a letter. It was on notepaper, embossed, with the title and address of the Turkish Minister of the Interior. It was addressed to Graham and signed Zia Hackey. Graham put it in his pocket. He said, "Last night Bernat stole my revolver. This evening I went to his cabin and tried to find his gun. It was not there. When I returned to my cabin, Muller was there with Bernat's gun. Muller came to tell me that unless I agree to delay my return to England, I shall be murdered in Genoa. The idea is that I should be certified as suffering from typhus and stay in a villa as if it were a clinic." "And you tell me about his suggestion?" Mr. Covetley beamed approvingly. "That was courageous of you." Graham smiled. "I came to you now so that there could be no chance of my thinking things over and deciding to take Muller's advice after all." Covetley said quietly, "Did you tell him that you were going to do so?" "No. I told him I thought he was bluffing." Mr. Covetley scratched his armpit thoughtfully. "If you mean he could not or would not kill you, you are wrong. He could and would. This ship docks several kilometers away from your consulate. I doubt you would complete one of those kilometers. Let us suppose you were to reach the consul by telephone. You would still have to wait at least half an hour for him. Your chances of surviving that half hour would not be lessened if you spent it drinking prussic acid. But his proposal... It would be easier to kill you on the road to this villa than on the waterfront at Genoa. I am afraid that Muller's proposal is not honest." "We have reached the conclusion," said Graham, "that I shall be killed if I accept Muller's proposal, and killed if I don't." Mr. Covetley patted his knee consolingly. "My dear friend, I was merely showing you it would be impossible for you to land in the ordinary way. Although the ship does not reach the quayside until 9 o'clock, she arrives off Genoa at about 4. She takes on a pilot as soon as it gets light. If you're suggesting I leave by the pilot boat, it's impossible. For you, yes. For me,
No, I am privileged. By 8 o'clock, I can be at the Turkish consulate. Arrangements can then be made. We will charter a plane to take you to Paris immediately. Graham's heart began to beat faster. He wanted to laugh. He said, "It sounds all right." "It will be all right. Listen carefully." He held up a forefinger. "You must go to Muller tomorrow. Tell him you agree to his suggestion. It is the best way to keep him quiet. Then go to your cabin, lock the door, and do not leave until 8 o'clock the following morning. Call the steward and tell him to put your baggage in the customer shed. You will remain on the ship until I tell you it is safe for you to land. You have cabin number 5. Go into cabin number 4. Wait there. Muller and Bernat will be looking for you, but they will have to go ashore. By that time, we shall be there and able to act. Are you quite clear?" "Quite." "Muller will ask you if I have made myself known to you. You will say yes. You will tell him that I offered to escort you to Paris myself. When you insisted on going to the British consul, I threatened you with the accusation that you had accepted bribes from an enemy agent to sabotage Turkish naval preparations." Graham stared at him. "This is a reminder that the threat still stands if I allow myself to be persuaded that Muller's proposal is acceptable." "I am a Turk," Mr. Kvetli said with dignity. "I am ready to give my life for Turkey. I should not hesitate to do less unpleasant things." Graham grinned. "I shall do exactly what you have told me to do." He stood up and was surprised to find that his knees felt weak. He said, "I've often wondered what a condemned man feels like when they tell him he has been reprieved. Now I know. I feel very sick and very tired." Mr. Kvetli laughed. "Go to bed now, and in the morning you will feel better." Graham did feel better in the morning. Even his hand was better. In the night the bandage had slipped, taking with it the bloody dressing. He was able to replace it with a piece of lint and 2 strips of plaster. The change, he felt, was symbolic. Rather to his surprise, he found that it was the thought of what he had to do about Josette which worried him most. She had been kind to him in her way. It was no good protesting that she was out for what she could get. She had made no secret of the fact, and he had tacitly accepted it. He was treating her shabbily. He did not see her alone until after 5 o'clock. The sun was pouring a red glow through thinning clouds, and the long, low strip of coast was already enveloped in a grey dusk. Drops of rain began to slant in onto the deck. He moved back out of the rain and found Matisse at his elbow. It had begun to rain in earnest. "Filthy," Matisse commented. "Yes," said Graham. Matisse was not looking at him. He seemed to be addressing the seagulls following the ship. "Do you know the word un cotillonné? A man who is governed by his wife is un cotillonné. In English we say henpecked. Ah, yes. My wife used to have a great temper. She still has, but I do not see it. But for the first 10 years of our marriage, terrible. I had a small business and I became bankrupt. It was not my fault, but she always pretended it was. For years I lived in misery. And then one day I made a great discovery. There was a socialist meeting in our town, and I went to it. I was, you must understand, a royalist. I went to the meeting because I was curious. The speaker was good. A week later my wife and I were with friends in a cafe, and I repeated what I had heard. Then, when we got home, I made the great discovery. My wife was a snob, and more stupid than I had dreamed. She said I had humiliated her by saying such things. Her friends were respectable people. I must not speak as if I were a workman. She cried. I knew then that I was free. If she displeased me, I became a socialist. To the smug little tradesmen whose wives were her friends, I would preach the abolition of profit and the family.
I bought books and pamphlets to make my arguments more damaging. My wife became docile. She would cook things I liked so that I would not disgrace her. He paused. For a time, I was free. I was a manager in a big factory. And then, Mr. Graham, I found that I had begun to believe these things I said. I, a royalist by instinct, became a socialist by conviction. There was a strike in the factory, and I, a manager, supported the strikers. I was dismissed. He shrugged. So, here I am. Graham decided that he liked Monsieur Matisse. He said, I work for an armaments manufacturer. On some points I find myself in agreement with you. A change came over the Frenchman's face. A small, delighted smile hovered round his lips. On which points do you not agree? He demanded eagerly. At that moment, Graham realized that whatever else happened to him on the Sastre Levante, he had made one friend. They were still arguing when Josette came out on deck. Unwillingly, Matisse interrupted what he was saying to acknowledge her presence. She wrinkled her nose. What are you discussing? It must be important that you stand in the rain to talk about it. We were talking politics, said Graham. No, said Matisse. Economics. Politics are the effect. We were talking about causes. But you are right. This rain is filthy. If you'll excuse me, I will see what has happened to my wife. With a smile and a nod, he went. Josette looked after him. He is nice, that man. It will not be so wet round the other side of the deck. They began to walk round. She took Graham's arm. I am worried. Worried? What about? This man who wants to kill you, imbecile? You do not tell me what you are going to do at Genoa. You will go to the British consul. The moment had come when he must do some steady lying. I shall go straight there. Afterwards I shall have to see one or two people on business. We can meet on the train. She turned her head a little sharply. You are telling me the truth. You are not saying this because you have changed your mind. My dear Josette. She pressed his arm. I did not mean to be disagreeable. It is only that I wish to be sure. We will meet at the train. What about José? It does not matter about him. The letters you are writing, are they all finished? I shall finish them this evening. Graham felt he could not stand much more of this. He said, You'll get cold if we stay out here. Shall we go inside? She stopped and withdrew her arms so that he could kiss her. She strained her body against his, then drew away from him, laughing. I like you very much, chérie. They began to walk towards the saloon. He was grateful for the dimness of the lights. Muller had been in the habit of leaving the table as soon as a meal was finished. Tonight, however, Bernat was the first to go. The Baronellis followed. I suggest, said Muller, that we take a walk together. I will meet you on the top deck in a few minutes. Graham was waiting at the head of the companionway when Muller came up. They moved into the lee of one of the lifeboats. Muller came straight to the point. You have seen Covetli? I have, said Graham grimly. Well? I have decided to take your advice. At Covetli's suggestion, at my own. I was not impressed by him. Frankly, I was amazed the Turkish government put such a fool on the job. He seems to think you are making some attempt to bribe me. He threatened to expose me to the British government. I said I would report his behaviour to Colonel Hackey. He did not seem to care. If that's your idea of a clever man, I don't trust him. And I don't see why I should risk my life for people who treat me as some sort of criminal. Covetli will have to be put off the scent somehow. You need have no fears. Graham detected a note of contempt in the smooth, heavy voice. It will be easy to give him the slip in Genoa. The next he will hear of you is that you are suffering from typhus. There will be a car waiting for us outside the customs shed. As long as you do not attempt anything foolish, everything will go smoothly. Good night, Mr. Graham. Until tomorrow." Graham waited until Muller had reached the deck below. Then he drew a deep breath. It was over. He was safe. He made his way down to his cabin. He slept fitfully. Towards 6, he decided it was useless to try to sleep any more. He drank coffee, put his things in his case, and sat down to wait. Mr. Covetley had told him to go into the empty cabin at 8. At 7:45, he rang for the steward. By 5:02, the steward had been and gone, taking the suitcase with him. Graham waited another minute and opened the door. The alleyway was empty. He walked along to number 4 and stepped quickly into the cabin. The next moment, he almost fainted. Lying across the floor, his head covered with blood, was Mr. Covetley. Clearly dead. Graham's first thought was that he must not be sick. He kept his eyes fixed on the porthole, and it was the sight of the funnel of a ship beyond a concrete jetty that reminded him. They were going into harbour, and Mr. Covetley had not reached the Turkish consulate. He looked down. It was Banat's work, without a doubt. Muller had decided to dispose of a possible threat to his arrangements. The way the blood had congealed showed that Mr. Covetley had been killed before the ship had stopped, before he had made his request to leave by the pilot boat. If he had made the request, a search would have been made for him. He would have been found. It might be days before the body were discovered if Graham did not call anyone. If he did call, he could accuse Muller and Banat. That the two accused were travelling with false passports could be proved, but that would take time. The Italian police would be justified in refusing Graham permission to leave for England. Mr. Covetley had died trying to make it possible for him to reach England safely. That Covetley's dead body should become the means of preventing that was grotesque. Supposing Muller had planned this, supposing he had overheard Mr. Covetley's instructions. But no. If he had known, he would have let the Turk go ashore. It would have been Graham's body that would have been found. Muller could neither know of the plan, nor suspect that the murder would be discovered. An hour from now, he would be with Banat and the gunman, waiting for the victim to walk unsuspectingly. But the victim would not be unsuspecting. There was a very slender chance. He knew that if he thought twice, he would change his mind. He must commit himself before he had time to think. A moment later, he was out of the cabin, and the door was shut behind him. 5 steps brought him to cabin number 3. He went in. Mr. Covetley's luggage consisted of one old-fashioned valise. It was standing strapped up in the middle of the floor, and on one of the straps was a 20-lira piece. Graham picked up the coin and held it to his nose. The smell of attar of roses was quite distinct. He looked for Mr. Covetley's overcoat and hat, failed to find them, and concluded that they had been disposed of through the porthole. He put the valise up on the berth and opened it. The only thing of interest to Graham was a box of pistol ammunition. Of the pistol which fired them, there was no sign. Graham shut the valise again. Banat had obviously counted on its being taken to the customs shed by the steward, who would pocket the 20 lira and forget about Mr. Covetley. By the time the customs people started asking questions about an unclaimed valise, Bernat would be non-existent. Graham, however, had every intention of remaining in existence. He picked up the valise and lugged it along to cabin 4. He was sweating now. He wiped his hands on his handkerchief and remembered that his fingerprints would be on the leather handle of the valise, as well as on the door handle. He went over these objects with his handkerchief and then turned his attention to the body. Down on one knee he gripped the right shoulder with one hand and the right side of the trousers with the other and pulled. The body rolled on its side. There was a leather holster under the left arm, but the gun was not in it. A gun was valuable. Bernat would naturally take it. Graham got up. There was nothing more to be done there. He put on a glove, cautiously let himself out, and walked along to cabin number 6. He knocked, and Madame Matisse opened the door. She gave him a startled, "Good morning." Matisse poked his head over her shoulder. "Hello? Are you ready so soon? Would you mind coming to my cabin for a moment?" Matisse came out in his shirt sleeves. "You look serious, my friend. Of course I will come." Inside the cabin, Graham shut the door. "I need your help," he said in a low voice. "When I get off this ship, an attempt is going to be made to kill me." "This is true?" Matisse was incredulous and suspicious. "It is. What I want you to do is go to the Turkish consulate, ask for the consul, and give him a message. Will you write this down? Here is a pencil and some paper. You ready? This is the message. Inform Colonel Haki, Istanbul, that Agent K is dead. Do not inform the police. I am forced to accompany German agents, Muller and Bernat, travelling with passports of Haller and Mavrodopoulos. I shall attempt to escape, but in the event of my death, inform British consul that these men are responsible." The Frenchman was staring at him with horror. He whispered, "Why?" "I should like to explain, but I can't. Will you deliver the message?" "Of course." The Frenchman stuck out his jaw aggressively. "But why do we not together shoot down these filthy Boches? I have my revolver, and together—" Graham seized his arm. "Let me buy your revolver. My own was stolen." Matisse drew himself up. "I will not sell it. I will give it." He pulled a small nickel-plated revolver out of his hip pocket and thrust it in Graham's hand. "It is loaded. Here is a safety catch." Matisse held out his hand. "I wish you luck, my friend," he said. A moment later he was gone. Graham breathed a sigh of relief and examined the revolver. It was a handy little weapon. He looked about himself for a place to put it. He decided on his top left-hand waistcoat pocket. When he buttoned his jacket, the butt was hidden, while the lapels concealed the bulge. He was ready. He went up on deck. They were in the harbour now. The only other person on deck was Bernat. He was gazing out at the shipping with the absorbed interest of a small boy. At some moment in the last 10 hours, this pale creature had come out of cabin number 4 with a knife, which he had driven into Mr. Gavetli's neck. He intended to commit, within the next few hours, yet another murder. Graham was no longer conscious of any fear. His thoughts arranged themselves with a quick efficiency that surprised him. He knew that his only chance of getting out of Italy alive lay in his beating Muller at Muller's own game. Muller, Bernat, and some others would be waiting with a car outside the customs shed. They would take him to some quiet place and shoot him. They thought that if he were to get into the car, he would do so believing that he was to make a show of falling ill. From their point of view, it would be much easier to drive through the streets of Genoa with a man who thought he was going to have 6 weeks' holiday than a man who had to be forcibly prevented from attracting the attention of passers-by. His chance of escape lay in his being able to take them by surprise. At that moment he came face to face with Muller. The old man nodded affably. "Good morning, Mr. Graham. It will be a pleasure to get ashore." Graham looked concerned. "I haven't seen Covetley this morning. I hope everything is all right." Muller's eyes did not flicker. "Covetley will not worry us. If necessary," he went on blandly, "I shall use force." "I hope that won't be necessary," said Graham. "So do I, Mr. Graham. So do I." He lowered his voice. "While we are on the subject of force, may I suggest that you are not in too much of a hurry to land? Should you happen to land before Bernat and myself have time to explain the situation to those who are waiting, an accident might happen." He turned his head. "Ah, we are alongside. I shall see you again in a few minutes. You won't make me feel that my confidence has been misplaced, will you?" "I shall be there," said Graham. He waited until the gangway had been hoisted into position, and the passengers were beginning to troop down it, then went and brought up the rear of the procession, immediately behind Josette. "I have been wondering where you were," she said. "I thought that we could drive together. It will save a taxi. I'm afraid I have some things to declare. We had better keep to our arrangement to meet at the train." She sighed. "You are so difficult. Very well, we meet at the train." They had reached the passport control at the entrance to the customs shed. There was only one customs officer. He disposed of Josette and José, and then turned to the Baronelli's mountainous bundles. To his relief, Graham had to wait. By the time he had made his way through, Josette and José had gone. Then he saw Muller and Bernat. They were standing beside an American sedan beyond the taxis. There were two other men. One was tall and thin, and wore a working man's cap. The other was dark, heavy-jowled, and wore a grey ulster and a soft hat. A fifth and younger man sat at the wheel of the car. His heart thumping, Graham walked towards them. Muller nodded as he came up. The tall man came and took Graham's case and put it in the luggage boot. Graham got in the car. Muller sat beside him. The tall man got in beside the driver. Bernat and the man in the ulster sat in the pull-down seats facing Graham and Muller. The car started. Almost immediately, Bernat took out his pistol and snapped the safety catch. Graham turned to Muller. "Is that necessary?" he demanded. Muller shrugged. He said something to Bernat, who grinned, snapped the safety catch again, and put the gun in his pocket. Muller turned his head. "We shall drive out to Santa Margherita." "What about Covetley? What's happened to him?" "He is probably writing a report. I advise you to forget about him." The car swung into the cobbled road leading to the dock gates. Graham braced himself for the sharp right turn that would take them towards the town and the Santa Margherita road. The next moment, he lurched sideways as the car swerved to the left. "I'm sorry," he said. "I thought we turned right for Santa Margherita." There was no reply. He sat back in his corner, trying to keep his face expressionless. He had assumed that it would be through Genoa itself that he would be taken for his ride. All his hopes had been based on that assumption. He glanced at Muller. The German agent was sitting back with his eyes closed, an old man whose work for the day was done. The rest of the day was Bernat's. Graham knew the small, deep-set eyes were feeling for his. Bernat was going to enjoy his work. Graham knew that unless some wholly unexpected way of escape presented itself, his chances of surviving the next hour were practically non-existent. Presently the car would stop. He would be taken out and shot as efficiently as if he had been condemned by a court-martial. He tried to breathe slowly and deeply, but the muscles in his chest seemed incapable of making the effort. He went on trying. If he surrendered to fear now, if he let himself go, he would be lost. He must not be frightened. Death, he told himself, would not be so bad. A moment of astonishment, and it would be over. He had to die sooner or later, and a bullet through the skull now would be better than months of illness when he was old. He became conscious of the revolver pressing against his chest. Supposing they decided to search him. But no, they wouldn't do that. They'd taken one revolver from him, and another from Mr. Gavetly. They would scarcely suspect there was a third. There were 5 other men in the car. He had 6 rounds in the revolver. He might be able to fire 2 of them before he himself were hit. If he waited until Bernat's attention had wandered, he might get off 3 or even 4. If he were going to be killed, he'd see that the killing was as expensive as possible. He got a cigarette out of his pocket, and then, putting his hand inside his jacket, as if he were looking for a match, snicked off the safety catch. The car purred steadily on. The windows were tightly shut, and Bernat's attar of roses began to scent the air. The man in the ulster was becoming drowsy. Once or twice he yawned. Then, obviously to give himself something to do, he brought out a heavy German pistol and examined the magazine. As he replaced it, his dull, pouched eyes rested for a moment on Graham. He looked away again, indifferently, like a passenger in a train with a stranger opposite. They had been driving for about 25 minutes. They passed through a small, straggling village and began to climb. Graham was vaguely aware that the fields and farmland which had flanked the road were giving way to clumps of trees and uncultivated slopes. Suddenly the car swung left between trees and began to crawl in low gear up a long, twisting hill. There was a movement by his side. He turned and met Muller's eyes. Muller nodded. "Yes, Mr. Graham, this is about as far as you are going. I have a request to make. As you have already caused me so much trouble, discomfort, and expense, would it be asking too much to suggest that you do not cause me any more? When we stop and you are asked to get out, please do so without argument or physical protest. If you cannot think of your own dignity, please think of the cushions of the car." He turned and nodded to the man in the ulster, who tapped on the window behind him. The car jerked to a standstill. Muller said something to Bernat. Bernat grinned. In that second, Graham acted. Before he knew what he was doing, he had pulled out Matisse's revolver and fired it full in Bernat's face. As the din of the shot thudded through his head, he saw something horrible happen to the face. Then he flung himself forward. The man in the ulster had the door open about an inch when Graham's weight hit him. He lost his balance and hurtled backwards through the door. He hit the road with Graham on top of him. Graham rolled clear and scrambled for cover behind the car. It could, he knew, last only a second or two now. The man in the ulster was knocked out, but the other 2 had their doors open, and Muller would not be long in picking up Bernat's gun. He might be able to get in one more shot. Graham realized he was crouching only a foot or so from the car's tank. With some wild notion of hindering the pursuit should he succeed in getting clear, he raised the revolver and fired. The muzzle had been practically touching the tank when he pulled the trigger, and the sheet of flame which roared up sent him staggering back out of cover. Shots crashed out, and a bullet whipped by his head. He turned and dashed for the trees and the slope shelving away from the edge of the road. He heard 2 more shots. Then something struck him violently in the back, and light flashed between his eyes and his brain. When he came to, he was lying face downwards on dead pine needles. Very slowly, he drew his knees up under him, raised himself on his hands, and began to crawl back to the road. The blast of the exploding tank had scattered fragments of ripped panelling and smouldering leather all over the road. Lying on his side amid this wreckage was the man in the workman's cap. What was left of the car itself was a mass of shimmering incandescence, and the steel skeleton buckling like paper in the terrific heat was only just visible. Farther up the road, the driver was standing with his hands to his face, swaying as if he were drunk. The sickening stench of burning flesh hung in the air. There was no sign of Muller. Graham got painfully to his feet and stumbled away, down through the trees, towards the lower road. The Turkish consul was a lean, businesslike man who listened intently to what Graham had to say before he said, "When I received your message this morning, I telegraphed Colonel Hackey, reporting that you were very likely dead. Allow me to congratulate you." "Thank you, I was lucky." Graham spoke automatically. There seemed something strangely fatuous about congratulations on being alive. "What about the car?" "Oh, we can leave the driver to explain that. If, as you say, your suitcase was destroyed in the fire, there is nothing to connect you with the accident. Are you well enough to travel? There's a train to Paris which leaves Genoa at 2 o'clock. It stops at Asti soon after 3. I recommend you get on it there. I can drive you to Asti." Graham felt a little light-headed. He laughed. "I'm sorry," he said. "It is rather funny. I had an appointment to meet someone on that train. She'll be surprised to see me." Except for the dim blue safety lights, the train was in darkness. He made his way slowly towards the third-class coaches. He had no difficulty in finding Josette and José. She turned her head as he slid the door open, and then, as he moved forward into the compartment, she started up with a cry. "What has happened? Where have you been?" "I missed the train at Genoa. I had a long drive to catch up." Josette dropped the cigarette she had been smoking on the floor and trod on it. She said, "But you will not keep me waiting in Paris, will you, chérie?" José gave a short laugh and began to pick his teeth with his thumbnail. Graham said, "I'd like to talk to you alone, Josette." Her face in that dim, ghastly light was expressionless. She moved towards the door. "I think," she said, "it will be better if you have a talk with José. I am not very good at business." She stepped into the corridor and slid the door to behind her. "She will come back," said José. "Why don't you sit down and wait?" Graham sat down slowly. José peered at his thumbnail, licked it, and said, "You like Josette, eh? She is very pretty, but she has no sense. That is why I, her husband, always look after business." Graham considered him for a moment. He said, "Say exactly what you mean." José twisted on his seat so that he was facing Graham. "You are a businessman," he said. "You do not expect something for nothing. I am her manager. I do not give anything for nothing. You want to amuse yourself in Paris. Josette is very amusing. She is a nice dancer, too. Together we earn at least 2,000 francs a week in a nice place. 2,000 a week." José shrugged. "If you are amusing yourself, we cannot earn our 2,000, so we must get it somewhere else. It is reasonable, eh?" Graham nodded. "Quite reasonable. And who do I pay? You or Josette?" "You can pay it to Josette if you like, but that would not be very chic." José leaned forward and patted Graham's knee. Graham stood up. "I think," he said, "that I should like to give the money to Josette. Will you find her?" José hesitated, then, with a shrug, got up and went out into the corridor. A moment later he returned with Josette. She was smiling a little nervously. "You have finished talking to José?" Graham nodded pleasantly. "Yes, but as I told you, it was you I really wanted to talk to. I wanted to explain that I shall have to go straight back to England." She stared at him blankly for a moment, and then she turned suddenly on José. "You dirty Spanish fool! What do you think I keep you for? You're dancing?" José's eyes glittered dangerously. He slid the door to behind him. He said, "You shall not speak to me so, or I shall break your teeth. I shall speak to you as I like." She was standing quite still, but her right hand moved an inch or two. Something glittered faintly. She had slipped the diamante bracelet she was wearing over her knuckles. Graham had seen enough violence for one day. He said quickly, "Just a moment. José is not to blame. He explained matters tactfully and politely, but I have to go straight back to England. I was also going to ask you to accept a small present." He drew out his wallet, produced a £10 note, and held it near the light. José made it clear that 2,000 francs was the amount I owed. "This note is worth just over 1,750, so I am adding another 250 francs. He took the French notes out of his wallet. She snatched them from him. "And what do you expect to get for this?" she demanded. "Nothing. It's been pleasant being able to talk to you." He slid the door open. "Goodbye, Josette." She stuffed the money into the pocket of her fur coat. Graham shut the door and walked away along the corridor. He did not notice Matisse until he had almost bumped into him. The Frenchman drew back to let him pass. Then, with a gasp, he leaned forward. "Monsieur Graham? Is it possible? My dear friend, I am so glad." Graham pulled the revolver from his pocket. "I wanted to return this to you, with my thanks. Afraid I haven't had time to clean it. It's been fired twice." "Twice?" Matisse's eyes widened. "You killed them both?" "One of them. The other died in a road accident." Matisse chuckled. "That is a new way to kill them." He looked at the revolver affectionately. "Perhaps I will not clean it. Perhaps I will keep it as it is, as a souvenir. It was all right, that message I delivered?" "Quite all right," said Graham, "and thank you." "There is no restaurant car on the train," said Graham. "I have some sandwiches and beer in my compartment, if you would like to join me." "You are kind," said Matisse. The door of the compartment behind him opened, and Madame Matisse peered into the corridor. She recognized Graham and nodded disapprovingly. "What is it, chérie?" asked Matisse. "The window? You open it and go out to smoke? I am left to freeze." "Then you may shut it, chérie. It is too stiff." Matisse sighed wearily and held out his hand. "Goodbye, my friend." Graham stood for a moment looking out of the window at the distant searchlights. Grey smudges moving restlessly among the clouds low down on the horizon. It was not unlike the skyline that he could see from his bedroom window, when there were German planes about over the North Sea. He turned and made his way back to his beer and sandwiches.